Eastern group now turning cold, Angels 12. Bogey Dope Western group.
285 43 box.
Okay, I go well south of the line, 14 miles.
Red 9 Slasher 02 copies, clear to engage. Danger close.
Clear to kill, clear to kill. He's abandoned now.
We receive not just light automatic
Mindy, let's come hard left.
Roger, keep hammer him. That's them right there.
Hey guys, Rob here from the Air Combat Sim Podcast. I'm fortunate enough to get Sedlo with me today on Sunday morning to take a look at what he's got on deck and what he's been doing. So we've been talking about doing this for a bit, and I've been lucky enough to get him this morning to do it. So hey, good morning, Sedlo.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you here. I'm a big fan, and I've been. I can tell you that when I get the chance to work on missions and campaigns, I always find yours to be one of the best out there. So I really appreciate all the effort that you're putting into it. But to get going this morning, why don't you give us a little bit of a background about yourself and how you got started working in flight sim, putting campaigns together, and DCS as a whole?
Yeah, well, ever since I could remember, I've been into aviation. Military aviation always impressed me, going to air shows and things like that. So as soon as, I had a computer that I had access to, I got into flight sim. I think it was with the original flight simulator. And then Falcon came out in the late 80s, and I got that, and I was just hooked from there. It's aviation, is in my blood. I got my private pilot's license as soon as I could, and just been into flying and virtual flying ever since.
That's very cool. And you've been involved with DCS for some time. Is that right?
Yeah, ever since Lomac, I guess, came out, I've been flying that. And the big game changer for me was when, the first A10C DCS came out. I don't know how long ago it was, but it's quite a while, 15 years maybe. So I got into that, and I really was blown away by the realism and the complexity of the aircraft, and it was exactly what I was looking for in a flight simulator.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I mean, I certainly remember way back in the day, and I was a Commodore 64 guy way back when. In fact, before that, I had a Timing Sinclair 1000, which I'm not even sure is a calculator anymore.
Coleco Atom was my first computer, so that's how far we're going back.
That's fantastic. But it's interesting you say, because I remember when I used to have those, I think with the Tommy Sinclair, it was like blocks that were just sort of in the amount of imagination. And while today we have a ton of great visualizations and imagery in graphics cards, it's amazing how much we could do with so little way back when. But my point was, it was interesting to sit there and think about, the state of the and the evolution of the study sim, and the amount of detail that I think you can get into today. Not only do you have to learn the aircraft, but I imagine as a campaign creator that you actually have to understand all the nuances behind the scenes too.
Very much so. Yeah, it's the learning curve on that is pretty steep. But yeah, you really have to get into how the aircraft works, how the systems work, and take that into consideration when you're creating something. So yeah, while the visualizations and the realism of the sim itself are high end, you really have to up your game when you're creating missions. Or I find that anyway. If you want to make a realistic mission, it's a lot of work. A lot of work.
Yeah, one of the things that was interesting, I appreciated in recently when I was prepping for this, I was just going through some of your videos, which I think are great. And for anybody that wants to get into some mission making. I think the AWACS and the air-to-air refueling one is a great one, and just putting some things on the board and going from there. But I thought some of the tips and tricks that you had in there were great. How do you and also just as a note, when you're sitting there going with triggers and trigger zone and pieces like that, I thought where you were putting out there going, I always start with this, first trigger to start the mission and things like that. So I always think as I get into it and I'm like, I think I'd like to put together a mission. I think some of those little tips and tricks are always great.
Right. Yeah. And I definitely relied on a lot of YouTube tutorials when I was starting out as well. Yeah. It's a building block approach, and I just sort of wanted to share sort of my process with that. And I do want to make more videos, tutorial videos like that in the future, if and when I have some time to do it, for sure. But yeah, it's online tutorials are invaluable for anyone wanting to get into mission making.
So with when it comes down to creating a mission, where do you generally start? I know most recently I've had the opportunity to fly Inherent Resolve, and that was a collaboration with you and Steve Davies. How did you get going with that?
Right. Well, I guess the idea came into my head. I was watching his podcast with guys like Stinger and Hacker and Star Baby.
Hmm.
They were really getting into detail on missions they flew, and I sort of wanted to do something like that. So I got in touch with Steve via his Discord,
Hmm.
and just sort of went from there. I got some tips and tricks from some of the SMEs, and yeah, I just started building something. I had always wanted to do it, and I just finally decided to do it.
So, folks, if you haven't had a chance, the Inherent Resolve mission, and I think you have variations of that for different aircraft types. Is that right?
I do, yeah. It started out with the F-15E, and when I was finished with that, I thought, well, there was a lot of other types of aircraft involved in Inherent Resolve, and I basically substituted another aircraft into it. But it's not that easy to do. You have to redo triggers and scripts and things like that, and then run through it to make sure everything's working as you intended. So yeah, quite a lot of work, but I was happy to do it, to have more people who fly maybe different aircraft or prefer different aircraft to have a chance to play the mission.
No, I think it's really fun. So for a noob like myself in terms of mission making, when you start up, the first thing that happens, it says, "Don't touch anything." What's going on in those few seconds with the missions getting spun up?
Right. Yeah. So those would be the start from push variations of the mission I have.
Hmm.
So you're up in the air. Basically, I'm running some scripts and triggers during that time to set up your aircraft, uh, to tune the radio, to set the autopilot maybe, to change the displays that you may have on your MFDs, just to set it up as close as I can to how it would actually be if you're starting out, in the air. So that's what that's about. And some aircraft, it takes longer to set things up than others, but yeah, a lot of scripting and mission making, mission editor magic going on behind the scenes there.
And did you get started with a lot of the scripting to your point? Now, are you a developer by trade, or how did you get going in scripting?
No, basically, I wanted to do more with the missions than I could with the vanilla mission editor. So I started looking into scripting. It, it was very daunting at first because I have no idea what all this stuff means. I probably still don't, but basically looking online at various scripts, the Mist and Moose scripting engines as well,
Hmm.
and just sort of like picked and choose what I wanted, and started modifying scripts a little bit to fit what I wanted to do. But yeah, scripting opens up a whole new world in mission making, and it helps you get a little more realistic scenarios and things like that. So it's been really helpful to me to learn, and I'm still learning, so it's great.
So when you get started with that, I mean, is there a specific set of tools that you use, or would you recommend? You mentioned the Moose tool set, or is that the one to go with, or is there, or would you just stick
Um,
with out of the box
yeah, well,
DCS?
there's sort of this. DCS has a scripting environment that you can access, so it does a lot of basic things. You can set a trigger to go off if a missile is fired or if an aircraft is in a zone or things like that. Things like Mist and Moose expand on that, so you can do even more. But for someone starting out, I think just learning the basic scripting engine would be helpful.
Hmm.
Uh, there's a web page. I think Hoggit runs it. It's a wiki about the mission scripting environment, and I would start with that.
Got it. So it's interesting because I think that's while there are a number of great resources that are out there, it's always interesting. I always find myself coming back to Hoggit from time to time because they do seem to have almost that specific wiki, which is fantastic.
Right. Yeah, I think Hoggit's been there since the beginning, so there's a lot of good information there.
So when you're starting out with a DCS mission, what is your process of coming up with the idea for it and then going from there?
Yeah, well, I guess from things I've read, combat accounts of people who have been there, things in the news, just sort of like picking and choosing from actual things that have happened in real life and just trying to expand it. So, I mean, you just running through the ideas in your head during the day, like,
Hmm.
wonder if I could do this or how would I do that? And then just sort of getting an idea of what you want to do and then starting from step one. It's uh, it's a cool process. It takes me a long time to think of things, and then by the time to actually put it together, it's generally quite a while. But yeah, just start from real life events, things you've read in books, novels, and things like that. Get ideas of how things were done, and just go for it.
I'm still waiting for someone to do the European version of the Final Countdown. So I think I think Reflected might have done something where he in terms of the Final Countdown movie from years ago. So I still think that there's an opportunity for the person who has it, who is interested in doing that, to be able to do World War II with a modern aircraft.
For
Maybe for
sure. I think there are some user files on the DCS website that have a couple missions like that. But yeah, I've been thinking about that idea as well, to maybe put into the European theater. But to make that realistic, we got to wait for the new World War II modules to come out. Like, I don't know, maybe the a zero AI would be
Mm.
really good for that.
Yeah, no, I think I think it'd be fun. I have a friend of mine that I work with that puts out some of the content on Authentic, and he's a historian. And I've been talking to him about. I'm like, dude, you need to. I think there's definitely an interesting storyline in mission set that could be pulled into that. But you're right. I think if we get some more pieces of the puzzle, I think it would come together great. But I'm very nostalgic for that movie, so I think it's got a special place in my heart.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. That was. I remember videotaping it when it was on TV one time, and I wore that tape out just watching it over and over again. Especially the F-14 scenes, the dogfighting and stuff. Great movie.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's funny you say it because I think that of all those movies that I saw over the years, like for example, even watching Top Gun, the one thing that I always bugged me was that they would show a plane launching and be the wrong wheels. It's like F-14 launching, then they'll show A6 wheels and things like that. Where
Yes.
I felt that when I was watching the Final Countdown, that a lot of the aviation scenes were just super solid, and for me, true to life as a aficionado, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. It was more raw, visceral than overproduced like some of the other movies, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one of the sides, you know, as I said, I always appreciate it when there's more stuff from Sedlo out there. But how do you interact with the community? Because one of the challenges I would think is sort of feedback and trying to respond to it. And I think one of the challenges, certainly with DCS, is when there's an update, sometimes it breaks things. How do you deal with feedback from the community or changes within DCS?
Right. Well, feedback is crucial for me in order to make my missions better. So people get in contact with me on YouTube in the comments of videos I might put out, or DM me on the Eagle Dynamics forums or Discord as well. So I'm getting feedback from all of that stuff, and as soon as I do, as soon as I have time, I will try to address it. As for changes in DCS, yeah, that is a very big challenge for me and for all the other content creators out there. Um, Sometimes the changes will break our missions, and
Mhm.
we may not find out about it until it's out there and people start leaving feedback.
I'm in the software industry, so I know that software is hard, but it doesn't mean that customers don't get mad. As we know about the community, they can be very vocal.
Exactly right. Yeah. So I mean, I try to address things if they come up. But lately everything has been pretty good. The last few updates have been very smooth as far as I'm concerned anyway.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. So, what do you think about moving away from the open beta to more of the standardized release schedule?
I think that's a great idea, to be honest. It Most people were using the open beta anyway, especially if you wanted to play multiplayer online. It was 99.9% open beta. And for Eagle Dynamics, having one version of their software out there is going to streamline things a lot. So I think it's a good thing. And honestly, I haven't read any negative feedback about the change so far. So I think it was a good move on their part.
Yeah, I think that you know, for what it's worth, I think agile software development is great, but there's certain things it works for and certain things it doesn't. And so, like for example, if your software needs to never fail, then with banking or space shuttle or things like that, then agile software development or rapid releases can, for the most part, and depends on how you implement it, it can be a challenge. But when I take a look at, you put something out where you have a community that's very vocal, giving them less variability is probably a good thing. So I think we're getting updates. I think everybody's always chomping at the bit for something new and exciting. F4, um, but it's going to be there when it's going to be there, and I think that you give people less to squawk about. Overall satisfaction probably goes up a bit.
I think so too. I agree.
So when there is an update. So recently, I think you had an update when there was for inherent resolve for the F-15E. Can you talk a little bit about that and some of the changes you made?
Right. Well, with the latest updates, the Syria map had been expanded to the south to include a vital airbase, in my opinion, Muwafaq Salti Air Base. That is the um, classified operating location in Jordan. I don't think it's classified anymore, but that was the one, a real main fighter base for Operation Inherent Resolve missions. So they included that into the game, and it was the airbase that I really had wanted to base things at. So as soon as it was available, I updated the Inherent Resolve missions to use that airbase. So quite excited about that and happy with the results.
Yeah, no, I think it's really cool, and I appreciate it when we have something. And again, I don't necessarily have the experience or knowledge to know that base would necessarily be there. When it pops up and things get more authentic, I always appreciate it a bit more. Very cool.
Agreed. And it was just a stroke of luck that that airbase shared the runway 1331 as the other airbase did, so I didn't have to update all of the voiceovers. So that was a real bonus.
Oh, that's that is very fortuitous.
Indeed.
So what are you working on these days?
Yeah, so these days, my ability to spend time at the computer has been a bit limited, but I am working on a mission, a single mission for now, but it may be expanded to a campaign for the upcoming F-4E. And that hopefully
awesome.
will be included with the module when it releases. So I'm very excited about that.
Can you give us any details about that, or are you going to hold that one back a bit?
Um, I'm not really sure what I am allowed to say at this point,
Fair
but
enough.
it's an F-4E mission. It's set on the Persian Gulf map, and I think honestly it's going to be my best mission yet. I hope. I'm really happy with it right now, and I hope you guys will be as well.
And so so with that mission, what makes it? You just said you're really happy with it. Is it based on the scenario or the tools that you've been using, or what makes it top in your mind?
Yeah, well, all of that really. The scenario I think is sort of set in like 1985. Iran and Iraq are still going at it, and the U.S. gets involved after a U.S. ship has been hit by a missile,
Mm.
Which did happen. The Stark back in the day.
Yep.
So yeah, the scenario. I've been also learning new things in the mission editor, so it's going to have some options for you as well. Various things like if you want a easier adversary, there's an option to select that, and what that will do will be to dumb the enemy down a bit, self-destruct their missiles after a certain time. So that's in there. One thing I'm really excited about is you have the ability to, when a radio message happens, to not have the subtitle up in the upper right. So people who fly VR have been asking for that, and I found a way to make that happen. So you can turn that off and on, and it just yeah, I think it's a fun mission. I think you guys will like it.
Now, when you start, do you ever think, have a time frame that you want the mission to last an hour or 2 hours, or do you have any time frames that you put together?
I do, yeah. My missions tend to be not as long as some of the others. I try to make it under an hour if I can,
Mm-hmm.
um, just because I make missions the way I would like to have missions
Mm-hmm.
personally, and for me, getting an hour on the computer is kind of rare these days. So
I understand.
yeah, I try to keep it within that sort of time frame. So yeah, that's sort of my preference, and that's kind of how I like to make the missions. Now the Operation Inherent Resolve, yeah, there's no way to make that one under an hour,
Yeah.
but you can speed up time, and those missions have a feature when something important happens, the time goes back to one time. So you won't miss anything important if you accelerate it.
It's interesting. We were talking before we started a little bit about, and I think it's absolutely true, is that communications that make it immersive. And I think when we take a look at, it's absolutely, you jump into a study sim and figuring out how to tune it. So, and this is one of the things I really appreciate about Inherent Resolve was the documentation that came with it. Now, did you put all that together? Or did you and Steve, or how did that come around?
Yeah, well, I did put it together mostly, but I did get input from Steve and some of his SMEs on sort of how to format things. Like a mission brief, start with the weather and go from there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely got some input from the community on that, and there's some things online from uh, recent Persian Gulf events. There's some mission planning cards and charts and things like that on there. So I just sort of base it on any feedback I can get from people who actually were there.
Yeah, I
But,
think. Yeah,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just saying, as far as radio communications go, it's always been number one on my mind. I've had a scanner ever since I was 12 or 13 years old. So listening to aircraft and military aircraft and things like that sort of thing was really important to me. So I've always tried to have realistic communications during the missions.
Yeah, and for those folks that haven't had a chance to try Sedlo's missions, I'll just say this is that, it forces you in a good way to become more immersive. So whether it's going to be their communication channel switches or reading the briefing material or for example, in Inherent Resolve, you're given updated mission coordinates that you have to put into the system to get where you're going. So not only learning the systems, but I think it gives you the ability to learn and to grow with the tools that are there. So like I said, I'm a big fan, but I would encourage folks to, take the time to learn the mission before you fly it.
Right. Yeah. That I agree 100% with that. And I try not to make it too complicated. And with campaigns, I sort of step up the level of difficulty as well. So, but yeah, definitely realism is important to me, and I want to try to make it as a authentic experience as I can.
So when it comes to I see you from time to time over on the campaign creators Discord that you're active on. Are there other campaign creators that you look at or ones that have inspired you?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Guys, the old schoolers like Baltic Dragon and Reflected, for sure. I've learned a lot from them, and we communicate all the time, and some of the newer ones as well, right? A lot of good campaigns coming out these days, and the community of developers is really increased and very diverse, and we're happy to collaborate with each other when it comes to tips and tricks and things like that.
That's very cool. So looking forward, we've got the F4 campaign. Do you have anything else on the horizon?
Nothing after that confirmed to be in development. I've got a lot of ideas. I've got some folks who have reached out and wanting to collaborate on various things. So I'm not really sure, to be honest, what's going to happen afterwards. But right now, the F4 mission and possible campaign are going to be my focuses.
Very cool. Well, I think I've gone through all of my questions today. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave blah, blah, blah? Is there anything else you'd like to leave the audience with?
Well, I would encourage, if anybody out there wants to start creating missions, I say go for it. There's a lot of help online that you can access. Once you get into mission making, it's very, very addictive and fun. So if you ever had the idea of you wanted to do it, I say go ahead and do it. If you have any questions of me, reach out. I'm on Discord or on the Eagle Dynamics forums. But yeah, if you want to do it, just take the plunge and do it. It's a lot of fun.
So as a last question that I have, and I didn't ask you this, and you can always feel free to decline, but I'm trying to pull in some hardware questions for folks. But I was curious, what hardware setup do you have and that you fly with?
Right. Well, I've got it used to be a high-end computer. It's not so great anymore, but it's average. It's a i7 9700K. I've got a 2070 Super running the graphics and 64 megabytes or gigabytes of sort of low quality RAM. But yeah, no, that's sort of where I'm at. I've got some WinWing stuff. I bought the F-16 Orion 2 and I've got the F-15EX throttle, and I just bought the Windwing rudder pedals, and I am very impressed with those. So
Oh, really? You like them a lot?
I do, yeah. I was using the Thrustmaster TFRPs or whatever they were,
Yep.
which worked great for sure. But I decided to upgrade, and I'm glad I did. These things are quality, and it's actually really improved my flying in everything. Helicopters are much easier now, I find.
Interesting. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's what I've got. It's I can run DCS at a pretty good frame rates of about 60 on Potato. I do have so my system allows me to run DCS at about 60 frames a second on fairly high graphics settings, so I'm happy with that. I do have a VR headset as well. Um, I don't use it very much because it's hard to do mission editing and VR at the same time, and to be honest, like 95% of my computer time is DCS mission making. So, yeah.
It's funny. Says I asked the same question of Baltic. I was like, "So, do you spend more time making missions, or do you spend time flying?" And he was making missions. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, we're in agreement on that. It's what we do.
yeah. Well, and I think he's getting closer to the time that he's planning on retiring to his DCS career. Do you have any plans on doing campaigning activities full time?
Yeah, it's the ideas in my head. I right now I can't really commit the time to do it and support it officially under contract, if you know what I mean. Like a lot of things in life are kind of in flux right now, so I can't commit to supporting something full time like that. But I don't know. I'm getting older. Maybe maybe I'll be able to do it soon. I hope to, anyway.
Well, I always find it. Like I said, I kind of laugh about Baltic because he's got a very nice, I guess, senior position with the EU doing strategy and things like that. But boy, he can't wait to retire back to Poland and and get cranking on the missions because that's his cup of tea. But I think it's great.
Yeah,
I think it's great.
yeah. If you have a passion for it and if you can make money at it, oh, wow, you're living the dream then, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, on that note, I want to thank you for taking the time to meet with me this morning and finally get the threat of coming on here with me. And I hope everybody enjoys learning more. And again, I think there's no better example of somebody who is leading the way in terms of mission making. And if you have any questions, I highly recommend checking out Sedlo's content and reaching out to him.
Yeah, and I welcome that as well. I hope to hear from people who are interested. That'd be great.
This has been the Air Combat Sim Podcast. Music by Vampire Stepdad. Want to support the show? Check out our Patreon. Follow us on Facebook. And be sure to leave a comment and rating.